Now, why am I talking about linear versus exponential growth? Well, for the simple reason that knowledge, competence on the individual level over time grows at a linear rate. Now, I know a little bit more than my parents, and so do you. And your parents, in all likelihood, knew a little bit more than your grandparents. Now, of course, there is individual variation here. I mean, I still think the older Bush sort of knew a little bit more than the slightly younger Bush. But I think, on average, it's fair to say that we are becoming a little bit smarter over time. But here's the trick. Knowledge on the societal level, what we know as mankind, is growing at an exponential rate. So there's a growing gap between what we know and what I know, or put differently, I am becoming increasingly stupid, relatively speaking. No person, not even the Nobel laureates, can control but a small fraction of all the knowledge that exists on our planet right now. In order to grow, in order to move beyond where we are right now, we need to apply a different logic. And I'm here today to share 4 such new recipes for success with you. This principle of self-organization is now spreading. And it may seem fairly weird to people to talk about self-organizing systems, but in reality, we are, as human beings, designed for this. Our brain already uses circular design. Self-organization boils down to using the principle of 360-degree feedback to your advantage. I admit it sounds a bit abstract and theoretical, but you can actually prove that to yourselves. Could I ask all of you to clap your hands in rhythm, please? Thank you. It's sort of my favorite exercise. At least you get an applause. It sounds a bit like those at the former Soviet Union Parliament, but it's better than nothing. 3, 4 claps, then you're all in rhythm, and still you didn't have a boss. In fact, if you had had a boss, you still wouldn't be in rhythm. Because it's difficult to remember who was the boss. Am I really listening to the boss? But when we get feedback from all around, we have this ability built into our brains, provided, of course, that we have a shared definition of the words clap, hands, and in rhythm. Now, leaving centralized systems behind is the first recipe. The second one has to do with giving up the idea that we can predict things and plan things and forecast things. Because the world is interconnected today in so many ways that we should expect the unexpected. We are, whether we like it or not, moving into a world of surprise and change. I mean, if you consider the statistics, and as somewhat of an academic, I still do that, it's pretty clear that in recent years, the so-called ETBS, the expected time between surprises, has come down, and it has in fact come down quite dramatically. I mean, 3 years ago, how many of you would have guessed that the newly elected president of the United States of America would be a young African-American man with the middle name Hussein? Pretty decent odds, I think, on that bet 3 years ago. So we see it in politics, we see it in our economy, we see it in culture. I mean, we had the nominations for the Oscars here just a few weeks ago. I mean, consider this, a couple of years ago, the most awarded movie at the Academy Awards was Brokeback Mountain. I mean, a romantic western about 2 homosexual cowboys? I mean, imagine that movie coming out of Hollywood 30 years ago, starring John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. I mean, at the end of the day, management isn't any more sophisticated or fancy than that. It's the stuff that we do. Now, from a slightly more theoretical point of view, we've lumped these activities together, we've put labels on them, and we've decided that management is about planning, it's about organizing, coordinating, commanding, and since we can't really trust the poor bastards we're in charge of, we also need to control.